The night was quiet in the mansion, the kind of silence money buys but can never fully fill. As the millionaire walked down the long hallway, he wasn't thinking about people. He was thinking about numbers, meetings, and the weight of a life built on control. He had returned home earlier than expected, the city lights still glowing behind him, when something unusual caught his eye near the nursery door. A faint sound. Not crying. Breathing. Soft. Careful. Almost protective. He paused, confused, and slowly pushed the door open. What he saw made him freeze. On the cold wooden floor, wrapped in a thin blanket, the black maid was asleep. Her body was curled slightly, one arm stretched protectively around his twin babies. One child's tiny fingers were gripping the edge of her uniform, while the other slept with her head resting against her shoulder. She hadn't taken the bed. She hadn't taken the chair. She had chosen the floor. For a moment, anger rose in his chest. Questions rushed in. Why was she here? Why wasn't she in the staff quarters? Why were the twins not in their crib? But as he stood there, watching closely, his emotions began to shift. Her face showed deep exhaustion, the kind that comes from giving more than what is asked. Her shoes were neatly placed by the wall. The bottle on the table beside her was empty, cleaned, and ready for the next feeding. This wasn't carelessness. This was sacrifice. The twins had been quiet for days, distant even, since their mother's passing. The house had felt hollow. Nannies had come and gone. None stayed long. None connected. Yet here they were, peaceful, safe, breathing in rhythm with a woman who had nothing to gain from loving them this way. A woman whose name he barely knew. He remembered how little he had noticed her before. She cleaned. She cooked. She moved silently through the house like part of the furniture. He had never asked about her life, her struggles, or why she sent most of her salary away every month. To him, she was just part of the routine. But now, seeing her on the floor with his children, something cracked inside him. A sudden noise made her stir. Her eyes opened wide in fear when she saw him standing there. She sat up quickly, whispering apologies, trying not to wake the twins. She expected anger, maybe even dismissal. What she didn't expect was the look on his face. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't speaking at all. He was staring, as if the truth had finally caught up to him. He knelt down slowly, his expensive suit touching the same floor she had slept on all night. His voice, when it finally came, was quiet and heavy with emotion, and the question he asked next would change all their lives in ways none of them could imagine. The maid didn't answer right away. She glanced down at the twins, making sure they were still asleep, then looked back up at him with tired eyes. There was fear there, but also something stronger, determination. She slowly shifted so the babies were more comfortable before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. She said they wouldn't settle, that they had cried for hours, that she was afraid to leave them alone again. The floor had been closer than the bed. She explained, closer to them if they needed her. The millionaire listened without interrupting. He noticed the small details now. The faint bruise on her wrist, hidden but not gone. The worn fabric of her uniform. The way she kept her body between him and the twins. Not out of disrespect, but instinct. Like a shield, he realized this wasn't the first night she had done this. Maybe not even the 10th. The thought unsettled him. He asked her name. The question surprised her more than anything else that night. She told him softly, then added that she had worked here for 3 years. 3 years, and he had never once said her name. The realization sat heavy in the room. This house was full of staff, full of rules, full of order, yet somehow the most important care had been happening unseen, on the floor in the dark. As he stood up, his mind drifted back to the weeks after his wife's death. The twins had been infants then, fragile and confused by the sudden absence of warmth they couldn't name. He had buried himself in work, believing money and structure would protect them. He had hired professionals, rotated caregivers, installed cameras. But grief doesn't follow schedules, and babies don't heal from loss with instructions. The maid shifted again, gently rocking one twin who stirred. She apologized once more, her voice tight, as if bracing for consequences. She said she understood if he wanted her to leave. She said she would pack quietly. That was when he noticed a small bag by the door. Not luggage, just essentials. She had already been prepared for this moment. He asked where she would go. She hesitated before answering, then said she had family far away, but no one close. She needed the job. She needed the money. But more than that, she said, she couldn't bear the thought of leaving the twins when they were finally sleeping without fear. Her words weren't dramatic. They were simple, honest, and they hit him harder than any accusation could have. The tension in the room thickened. Outside, a distant car passed, reminding him that the world kept moving, unaware of what was unfolding inside his home. He looked at the twins again, their faces calm, their small chests rising and falling. For the first time since becoming a father, he felt like an outsider in their world. Someone else knew them better. Someone else understood their cries, their silences, their needs. He took a step back, conflicted. This situation challenged everything he believed about control, about class, about boundaries. Trusting someone this deeply felt dangerous. And yet, ignoring what it seemed felt even worse. As he turned toward the door, he told her to stay where she was for now. His tone was unreadable. She watched him leave, her heart racing, unsure if that meant safety or the beginning of something far more complicated. And as the door closed softly behind him, the question lingered in the air, unanswered, heavy with consequence. The minutes felt longer than the entire night. The maid sat still, barely breathing, afraid any movement might change whatever fragile balance had just formed. The twins slept on, unaware that their future was being decided somewhere beyond the closed door. When footsteps returned, heavier and slower this time, her heart dropped. She tightened her hold on the blanket, ready for the worst. The millionaire stepped back into the room, but he wasn't alone. An older woman followed him, his mother. Her sharp eyes took in the scene instantly. The maid on the floor, the twins pressed close, the quiet bond that needed no explanation. For a moment, the room felt like it might shatter under the weight of judgment. The maid lowered her gaze, prepared herself to be dismissed, maybe even blamed. But instead of anger, the older woman knelt down. She reached out and gently brushed a hand over one twin's hair. Her voice broke as she spoke, saying she hadn't seen them sleep like this since their mother was alive. She looked up at her son, and there was something close to accusation in her eyes. She asked him how long this woman had been carrying what he had refused to face. The truth spilled out then. The nights of crying, the rotating staff, the cameras that showed activity but not care. He admitted that he had mistaken control for love, that he had paid for help but never stayed long enough to understand it. The maid finally spoke again, her voice trembling as she said she never meant to overstep. She only wanted the twins to feel safe. The tension broke quietly. He told her she wasn't being fired. He told her she was being offered something different. Stability, respect, a role that acknowledged what she had already been doing. He said the words carefully, like promises he intended to keep. The maid's eyes filled with tears she didn't wipe away. She nodded, still unsure if this was real. Life in the house began to change after that night. The twins laughed more. The halls felt warmer. The millionaire came home earlier, sat on the floor himself, learned the rhythm of bedtime instead of outsourcing it. For the first time, the house felt like a home. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked like a story of kindness finally recognized, of barriers slowly falling. But the truth had one more layer. Weeks later, a letter arrived addressed to the maid. The millionaire saw it by chance, an official seal catching his eye. When she explained, her hands shook. She hadn't planned to tell him yet. Years ago, before she ever worked in this house, she had been trained as a licensed neonatal caregiver. She had lost her own child shortly after birth, and caring for others had been her way of surviving the grief. She hadn't hidden it out of deceit, but pain. He sat down, stunned. The bond, the instinct, the sleepless devotion, it all made sense now. What he thought was coincidence was purpose. What he thought was charity was strength. That night, as the twins slept peacefully between them, he realized the greatest wealth in his house had never been counted. And just when he believed the story had reached its end, a quiet truth settled in his chest. The woman he once overlooked hadn't just been protecting his children. In ways he was only beginning to understand, she had been saving him too. In the days that followed, The house settled into a new rhythm. Not rushed, not perfect, but honest. The millionaire began waking up earlier, listening for the twins before the monitors alerted him. He learned how they liked their bottles warm, how one needed a soft one to fall asleep, while the other preferred quiet. He stopped seeing care as a task and started seeing it as connection. The change didn't come from guilt alone. It came from understanding. The maid, now finally called by her name, was given a proper room near the nursery, though she still spent many nights close by. Not on the floor anymore. Not hidden. She accepted the changes slowly, careful not to trust too fast. Trust had been fragile in her life. But each day, the millionaire showed up in small ways. A thank you spoken out loud, a seat at the table, a question about her family, asked and truly heard. His mother visited often, watching with quiet relief as the twins grew stronger and happier. She spoke gently to the maid about her own losses, about grief that never fully leaves but can soften when shared. Those conversations stitched something new into the house, something deeper than routine. The staff noticed it too. The mansion no longer felt divided by roles. It felt united by responsibility. One afternoon, the millionaire sat alone in his office, reviewing old security footage. Not a monitor, but to understand. He saw the nights he had missed, the moments of comfort he had never witnessed. He closed the laptop and made a decision that surprised even himself. He set up a trust for the twins that wasn't just about money, but about care, education, and presence. And he insisted the maid be part of the plan, not as help, but as family. She tried to refuse at first. She said she didn't want special treatment. He told her it wasn't special. It was deserved. He reminded her that care had value, that love was labor, and that dignity should never depend on a title. The words mattered. They stayed with her. As time passed, the story spread quietly, not as gossip, but as example. People noticed how the twins clung to her hand and ran to him at the same time. How a wealthy man learned humility. How a woman once unseen became essential. The narrative shifted from charity to respect, from wealth to worth. On the twins' first birthday after that night, there was no grand party, just a small cake, soft laughter, and candles blown out together. The millionaire held one child, the maid held the other, and for a moment, the world felt balanced. He realized then that success without compassion is empty, and power without empathy is fragile. As the evening ended, he looked around the room and understood the final truth. The floor where he had once found them was still just a floor. But what happened there changed everything. Not because of money or status or control, but because someone chose to stay, to care, and to love when it was easiest to walk away. And that was the lesson that lingered long after the lights went out.